Well, this kind of leads us into the question of policy, which I'll ask both of you about. Sure. We saw President Obama make a very important speech the other day, laying out some goals and some programs having to do with reducing carbon emissions. But still, I think it's fair to say that our country doesn't really have a comprehensive energy policy. And I'm wondering how much that affects both of your businesses or startups in the energy world in general. How does that affect, your uncertainty, how you make calculations, how you make decisions? Tom, I'll start with you.
Sure. When we first started slogging around Washington a little bit, trying to understand what the environment was for funding, one of the things that we began to understand very quickly was one of the reasons that you don't have government mandates for policy is because the technologies that are required to implement that policy are so expensive that they would effectively put the industry out of business. There was a cement company that tried to put in a carbon sequestration process, and it ended up costing more than the cement plant, and so they had to shut it down. So I think when governments begin having conversations with companies like Jay's in combination with people that are really being affected by that, whether it's a coal-fired plant or anybody else, that's when you really get very interesting policy and very interesting support that's really meaningful to the industry and certainly meaningful to companies like ours. There are places where that happens. It doesn't happen enough. Some of that, I think, is because startups have not had the influence on sustainable technologies and encouraging these collaborations with big companies to move quickly enough. We're finding that the combination of us with some larger companies that have are of like mind, it's amazing how fast the support comes and how fast the research goes.
Mm-hmm. Jay, how important is the policy environment to what you're doing?
It's a fair question. If you examine the history of sustainable energy technology policy in the United States in the past 10, 20 years, you'll see that if you look at it, you realize that it's an incredible hot potato right now. And it's to the extent that we do not allow ourselves to rely on policy. We cannot. We have to rely on a good fundamental economic proposition. If the bottom line if we can't walk into any customer out there and say we are disruptive for economic reasons, and I don't care if you really are interested in mitigating carbon or not, you will buy our product because it's the best product for the right price, then we feel that we are in a precarious, risky position because of the political waters change so rapidly. That being said, one of the key attributes right now that is missing policy-wise in North America is a regulated way to evaluate stored energy on the grid. It doesn't exist. We have all these different degrees of regulation, deregulation, different zones around the country, and the types of energy storage and the ways that it could be valued are vastly different depending on location. And they change, right? As the grid changes, as different power plants are erected or removed or whatever. If there's a carbon tax imposed, it would shift everything again. And the fear of change makes installations of storage in North America almost impossible. The utility corporation, the utility industry in general is incredibly slow moving, and this added unknown sense of risk is absolutely killer. So without a good sense of how to evaluate energy that's stored, we really also are having a lot of trouble. So we can't think like that because it will undermine us.
So does that mean that your markets are more overseas than in the U.S.
Our entry markets are by definition overseas right now, in part for this reason. Yeah, and again, if we become cheap enough, it won't matter, right? And that's as you look at the way we plan to develop and cost down our product and so forth, that's 2016, 2017. At that point, we may have something that's so disruptively inexpensive that even in the vast, disparate markets that exist right now, we would still be able to sell into that with much less risk. So, but right now, the capex associated with our current price points in 2014, 2015 are not enough to overcome this risk that people sense.